Welcome to Old Paper Trails. Tonight, we drift back to the year 1894, opening the dusty, leather-bound logbook of a solitary lighthouse keeper to join him in the quiet rhythm of his days on the edge of the world. October 3rd, 1894. The morning broke with a heavy gray mist clinging to the coastline. Visibility was poor, roughly less than 2 miles. I awoke at 5 a.m. to tend to the lamp. The oil levels were sufficient, though the wick required significant trimming after the long night. The consumption of oil last night was exactly 2 pints and 3 gills. I spent the better part of the morning polishing the brass fittings of the Fresnel lens. The salt air is relentless, and corrosion appears quickly if one is not vigilant. By noon, the wind shifted to the northeast, blowing at a force of 3 on the Beaufort scale. The temperature in the lantern room was 58 degrees Fahrenheit. I recorded the barometer reading at 29.8 inches, holding steady. There were no ships sighted until late afternoon, when a small fishing schooner passed roughly 3 miles off the point, heading south. I spent the evening organizing the coal supply for the winter months. We have 40 sacks remaining. October 4th, 1894. A quiet day. The mist has lifted, replaced by a sharp, cold wind from the north. The sky is a pale, washed-out blue with high cirrus clouds drifting slowly. I conducted a routine inspection of the gallery railing at 8 a.m. Several bolts on the western side show signs of rust. I've noted this in the maintenance ledger and will apply grease tomorrow. The sea is choppy today, with whitecaps visible as far as the horizon. At 10 a.m., I cleaned the storm panes of the lantern room. It is tedious work, requiring a mixture of vinegar and water to remove the dried salt spray. The glass must be perfectly clear. By midday, the temperature dropped to 52 degrees. I ate a simple lunch of bread and dried pork. The afternoon was spent sweeping the spiral staircase. There are 112 steps, and dust accumulates in the corners. I counted each step as I swept, a habit I cannot seem to break. October 5th, 1894. Rain began falling shortly after midnight and continued steadily throughout the morning hours. It is a cold, soaking rain. The wind has picked up, blowing east-northeast at a force of 5. The sound of the rain against the metal roof of the lantern room creates a constant drumming rhythm. I checked the oil reservoirs 3 times today to ensure no moisture had entered the vents. All is dry. The barometer has dropped slightly to 29.6 inches. Due to the gloom, I lit the lamp earlier than usual at 4:30 p.m. The rotation mechanism of the lens is making a faint clicking sound. I applied a small amount of clock oil to the gears, which seems to have silenced it for now. I spent the evening repairing a tear in my canvas jacket. The Solitude is heavy today. The only sound is the wind and the rhythmic ticking of the rotation clockwork. October 6th, 1894. The storm has passed. The sun rose clear and bright, illuminating a calm sea. The water is a deep, dark blue today. I spent 4 hours this morning painting the interior wall of the watchroom. The white paint was peeling near the window frame. It is slow work, requiring precision. I paused at noon to observe a large merchant vessel, likely a steamer, passing on the horizon. It was too far to identify the flag, but it moved steadily westward. The temperature has risen to 60 degrees. I opened the vents to circulate fresh air through the tower. In the afternoon, I walked down to the supply shed to inventory the wick supply. We have 3 boxes of wicks remaining. I must remember to request more in the next monthly report. The seagulls are particularly loud today, gathering on the rocks below the cliff. I sat for a moment on the gallery and watched the waves crash against the granite base of the tower. October 7th, Sunday. Routine duties only. I polished the reflector panels and cleaned the soot from the upper ventilation hood. The draft was not pulling correctly last night, causing the flame to flicker slightly. After cleaning the soot, the draft improved. The wind is calm, barely a breeze from the south. The ocean looks like a sheet of glass. I spent the afternoon reading a geological text sent from the mainland. It discusses the formation of coastal rocks. It is dry reading, but it passes the time. At 5 p.m., I recorded the weather. Sky clear, wind south, force 1, barometer 30.0 inches. I prepared a supper of boiled potatoes and dried fish. The light was lit at sunset, 6:12 p.m. The rotation is smooth. The beam sweeps across the dark water, a constant, reliable line of light in the emptiness. October 8th, 1894. Fog returned this morning, thick and dense. I engaged the fog bell mechanism at 6 a.m. It strikes once every 30 seconds. The machinery requires winding every 2 hours. This kept me occupied for most of the day. The dampness is seeping into everything. The walls of the tower feel cold and wet to the touch. I kept a small fire burning in the watchroom stove to combat the moisture. Visibility is 0. I cannot even see the ground from the downnery. It feels as though the lighthouse is floating in a white void. I checked the fuel levels for the fog bell engine. We have ample coal. The sound of the bell is mournful and loud, ringing through the white silence. No ships were heard or seen. It is a day of mechanical repetition. Wind the clockwork, check the oil, stoke the fire, listen to the bell. October 9th, 1894. The fog lifted by mid-morning, revealing a gray, overcast sky. The sea is restless, with a heavy swell rolling in from the Atlantic. I stopped the fog bell at 9:15 a.m. The silence that followed was abrupt. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning the bell mechanism, wiping down the gears and checking the striker for wear. It is in good condition. The postboat did not arrive today due to the swell. The landing is too dangerous. I had hoped for a newspaper, but I must wait. I occupied myself in the afternoon by organizing the tool chest. I sharpened the chisels and oiled the saw blades. Everything has its place. Order is essential here. If a tool is lost, it cannot be replaced for weeks. The wind is shifting west, bringing colder air. I suspect winter is arriving early this year. October 10th, 1894. The sea has finally calmed enough for the supply boat to dock. It arrived at 11 a.m. I met the crew at the landing stage. We unloaded 4 barrels of oil, 2 sacks of flour, a crate of dried beans, and the mail. It is heavy work hauling the barrels up the cliff path using the winch. My muscles ache from the exertion. The captain of the boat brought news from the mainland. Apparently, the winter is predicted to be harsh this year. He stayed for only an hour before casting off to beat the tide. I spent the remainder of the afternoon stowing the provisions in the cellar. I received a bundle of newspapers from last week. I shall ration them, reading only 1 per day to make them last. The evening is cool, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. I lit the lamp at 5:58 p.m. October 11th, 1894. I awoke to a dense fog again, though not as thick as Monday's. I did not engage the bell as visibility remained above 2 miles. I spent the morning trimming the wicks. It is a delicate task. If the cut is not level, the flame burns unevenly and smokes the glass. I am meticulous about this. At noon, I noticed a slight vibration in the floorboards of the lantern room. Upon inspection, I found a loose nut on the pedestal of the lens. I tightened it with a large wrench. The vibration ceased. The rest of the day was uneventful. I watched a large flock of cormorants drying their wings on the rocks below. They sit perfectly still, like statues. The barometer reads 29.9 inches and is rising slowly. October 12th, 1894. The sky is a brilliant, cloudless blue today. The wind has shifted to the southwest, bringing warmer air. The temperature reached 65 degrees by midday. I took advantage of the good weather to whitewash the base of the tower. The salt spray strips the lime quickly, leaving the stone exposed. It is repetitive work. Dip the brush, apply, repeat. The rhythm is hypnotic. I worked for 6 hours until my arm was stiff. The tower looks bright and clean against the blue sky. In the late afternoon, I sat on the gallery railing and smoked my pipe. The horizon was clear. I could see the smoke of a steamer far to the east, likely heading for Liverpool. It is quiet. Even the gulls are silent today. October 13th, 1894. A gale blew in overnight. I was awakened at 3 a.m. by the howling of the wind around the lantern. I went up to check the glass panes. The wind force is strong, perhaps a force 8. The waves are crashing high against the cliff, sending spray halfway up the tower. I spent the entire day inside. It is too dangerous to venture out on the gallery. I spent the morning polishing the brass oil cans and the spare lamps. In the afternoon, I read the first of the newspapers brought on Wednesday. The news feels distant, as if it is happening on another planet. Politics and city troubles seem irrelevant here. My world is stone, glass, and water. The barometer has dropped sharply to 29.2 inches. The storm will last through the night. October 14th, 1894. The storm raged until dawn and then broke suddenly. The morning is calm, but the sea remains angry and churned. The beach below is covered in driftwood and seaweed thrown up by the tide. I went outside to inspect for damage. One of the shutters on the storage shed had banged loose, but the tower stood firm. I found 3 small birds dead on the gallery walkway. They must have struck the glass during the night, confused by the light in the storm. I buried them in the soft earth behind the garden patch. It is a sad but common occurrence. I spent the afternoon cleaning the salt crust from the lantern room windows. It was thick today, requiring hours of scrubbing. October 15th, 1895. A gray, nondescript day. The clouds are low and flat. No wind. The ocean looks like lead. I decided to check the inventory of the spare parts box. We have 2 spare burner tubes, a dozen washers, and 3 glass chimneys. I noted this in the ledger. At noon, I cooked a stew using the dried beans and some salt pork. It simmered on the stove for hours, filling the room with a savory smell. It is a comfort in this damp weather. I spent the evening carving a piece of driftwood I found yesterday. I am whittling it into the shape of a whale. It is slow work, but I have nothing but time. The light was lit at 5:50 p.m. The rotation is steady. October 16th, 1894. I awoke with a slight headache today. Perhaps it is the drop in pressure. The barometer is falling again. I performed the morning duties slowly, cleaning the lens, filling the reservoir, winding the weights. I counted the rotations of the light, 1 flash every 15 seconds, 4 flashes a minute, 240 flashes an hour. It is the heartbeat of this place. In the afternoon, I walked the perimeter of the island. It takes exactly 20 minutes to walk the full circle. I found a glass bottle washed up on the shore, but it was empty. No message, just trash from a passing ship. I returned to the tower and wrote in this log. The wind is picking up from the north. Winter is definitely coming. October 17th, 1894. Cold. The temperature dropped to 48 degrees inside the tower this morning. I wore my wool sweater while polishing the reflector. The sun is shining, but it offers no warmth. The light is harsh and sharp. I can see the white cliffs on the mainland clearly today. I wonder what the people in the village are doing. Likely preparing for market day. Here, every day is the same. I spent the afternoon greasing the heavy iron door at the base of the tower. It had developed a squeak. I used the heavy tallow grease. Now it opens silently. I prefer the silence. At sunset, the sky turned a bruised purple and orange. I watched it fade into black from the watchroom. Another day concludes. October 18th, 1894. The wind has veered to the northwest today, bringing a biting chill. I spent the morning inspecting the copper lightning conductor that runs down the side of the tower. It is essential work before the heavy winter storms set in. I found one bracket loose near the gallery walkway and secured it with fresh copper wire. My hands were numb with cold by the time I finished. I warmed them over the stove in the watchroom while drinking a cup of strong tea. At noon, I recorded the temperature at 45 degrees. The sea is gray and choppy, with white foam streaking the surface. I spent the afternoon organizing the logbooks from previous years. It is strange to see my own handwriting from 5 years ago, recording the same wind, the same rain, the same routine. Time moves in a circle here. October 19th, 1894. A ship was sighted at dawn, a large 3-masted schooner battling against the headwind. She was struggling to make headway. I watched her through the telescope for nearly an hour. She did not signal for help, so I simply observed. It is a reminder of the struggle out there while I remain safe behind these stone walls. By midday, the ship had disappeared over the horizon. I polished the brass weights of the clockwork mechanism today. They must be kept free of tarnish to ensure the rotation speed remains constant. I used a mixture of vinegar and ash. It leaves a sharp scent in the air. The rest of the day passed in silence. The only sound was the ticking of the escapement gears. October 20th, 1894. Rain. A steady, cold drizzle that started in the night and has not stopped. The humidity inside the tower is rising. I had to wipe down the interior walls of the lantern room 3 times today to prevent condensation from dripping onto the lens. Water on the lens can distort the beam. It is a constant battle against the damp. My left knee aches today. The dampness gets into the joints. I spent the afternoon seated in the armchair, reading the Bible. I read the book of Job. It seemed fitting for the gray atmosphere. At 4 p.m., I went down to the cellar to check the coal supply again. We are using more coal than usual to keep the damp out. I must be careful with the rationing. October 21st, 1894. Sunday. The rain has ceased, but the sky remains heavy and overcast. The sea is a dull slate color. I performed the weekly full inspection of the optical apparatus. I climbed inside the great glass lens to clean the prisms from the inside. It is a tight space, filled with the smell of oil and brass. I polished every prism with a soft chamois leather cloth. The glass must sparkle. When I emerged, I felt dizzy for a moment from the fumes. I spent the rest of the day resting. I did not cook a full meal, just ate some bread and cheese. The isolation feels thicker on Sundays. No church bells, no voices, just the wind whistling through the vents. October 22nd, 1894. I was greeted this morning by the sound of geese. A large V formation was flying high overhead, heading south. They are escaping the winter that is coming for me. I watched them until they were just specks in the distance. The wind has dropped and the sea is calmer today. I took the opportunity to clean the soot from the flue of the stove. It is a dirty job. Soot covers everything, my hands, my face, my clothes. It took me 2 hours to scrub myself clean with cold water and rough soap. In the afternoon, I sharpened the kitchen knives. The rhythmic sound of the stone against the steel was the only noise in the kitchen. I lit the lamp at 5:45 p.m. The days are getting shorter. October 23rd, 1894. A quiet day. The barometer is steady at 30.1 inches. I decided to bake bread today. I mixed the flour and water and let the dough rise near the stove. The smell of baking bread makes the tower feel more like a home, if only for a few hours. While the bread baked, I mended a fishing net that I found washed up last week. I do not fish often, but the net might be useful in the spring. The bread came out heavy but edible. I ate it warm with a little butter. It is the small comforts that matter. The sunset was spectacular tonight, streaks of crimson and gold across the western horizon. I watched the colors fade into the indigo of the night. October 24th, 1894. Fog again. It rolled in suddenly at 8 a.m., swallowing the world. I started the fog bell immediately. Clang. Silence. Clang. Silence. It is a monotonous companion. I cannot see the water, only the white wall of mist pressing against the glass. I spent the day knitting a new pair of wool socks. My old ones are wearing thin at the heels. The clicking of the needles fills the space between the strikes of the bell. It is tedious work, but it keeps the hands busy and the mind from wandering too far. I checked the bell mechanism every 2 hours. It is functioning perfectly. The damp cold is seeping through the walls again. October 25th, 1894. The fog cleared overnight, leaving behind a crystal-clear atmosphere. The visibility is excellent today. I can see the outline of the distant islands to the north. The temperature is 42 degrees. I spent the morning carrying coal from the lower store to the watchroom scuttle. 10 buckets. It is heavy work, and I was out of breath by the end. But the physical exertion felt good after days of sitting. In the evening, the sky was filled with stars. No moon. The Milky Way looked like a spilled bucket of milk across the black sky. I stood on the gallery for a long time looking up. The light from my tower sweeps out, a weak beam compared to the millions of stars above. It makes one feel very small. October 26th, 1894. The temperature continues to drop. It was 40 degrees at dawn. The stone floor of the lantern room retains the cold, striking through the soles of my boots. I spent the morning applying a mixture of tallow and tar to the exposed ironwork on the outer gallery. It is messy, black work, but it shields the metal from the biting salt spray. My hands smell of tar, even after scrubbing them with sand and soap. At noon, I observed a pod of whales passing to the south, their spouts visible against the dark water. They are moving to warmer waters. I envy them slightly. The afternoon was spent checking the water cistern. The level is high thanks to the recent rains. We shall not thirst this winter. October 27th, 1894. A strong gale is brewing. The barometer has fallen steadily since last night, resting now at 29.0 inches. The sky is a bruised purple color, heavy and low. I spent the day securing everything outside. I lashed down the cover of the coal bunker and brought the splitting axe inside the shed. I double-checked the storm shutters on the lower windows. The wind is starting to moan around the tower, a low, mournful sound that vibrates in the walls. I lit the lamp early at 4:45 p.m. as the daylight faded quickly into a premature twilight. The beam cuts through the gathering gloom, searching for ships that should not be out in this weather. October 28th, 1894. Sunday. The gale arrived in full force around midnight. Sleep was impossible. The tower shakes, imperceptibly to a stranger perhaps, but I can feel the stone trembling against the fury of the Atlantic. The waves are breaking over the lantern gallery, 70 feet above sea level. I spent the entire day in the watchroom, keeping the stove stoked high. I read the almanac, studying the tide tables for next year. It is comforting to see that the tides are predictable, even when the weather is not. I ate a cold supper of hardtack and cheese. It was too difficult to keep a pot on the stove with the drafts blowing down the chimney. October 29th, 1894. The storm has broken, leaving behind a chaotic, churning sea. The sky is clearing, but the wind remains strong from the north. I went out to the gallery at 10 a.m. to clean the salt from the glass. The spray has dried into a thick white crust that blocks the light. It took 4 hours of scrubbing with vinegar and fresh water to clear the panes. My arms ache from the effort. While working, I found a piece of timber wedged in the railing, shattered wood from a ship perhaps, or just drift from the mainland. I threw it back into the sea. The ocean gives, and the ocean takes. October 30th, end of the month duties. I spent the day compiling the monthly report for the Lighthouse board. I recorded the oil consumption, 96 gallons. Wicks used, 4 feet. Accidents? None. It is a ledger of survival. I wrote carefully, ensuring no ink blotted the page. The pen scratching against the paper was the only sound in the room. I also drafted a requisition list for winter supplies, more wool blankets, a new kettle, and 2 barrels of salt pork. I hope the supply boat can make the landing next week. The sunset tonight was blood red, painting the water in crimson. A sailor's warning, or just the end of another day? October 31st, 1894. All Hallows' Eve. The villagers on the mainland might be lighting bonfires tonight to ward off spirits. Here, I have only the great lamp. The wind is howling again, sounding like voices crying out in the dark. It is easy to believe in ghosts in a place like this. I sat in the lantern room for a long time tonight, watching the moths flutter against the glass, drawn to the light. They beat their wings until they are exhausted. I feel a kinship with them. I made a cup of hot cocoa, a rare treat, and toasted the empty room. To the ghosts of the deep, I said. The clockwork ticked in response. November 1st, 1894. A new month. November brings the true dark. The sun rose late, struggling through a bank of fog. I opened a fresh page in the logbook. The paper is crisp and white, waiting to be filled with the same repetitive details. I spent the morning inventorying the medical chest. We are low on quinine and bandages. I noted this. In the afternoon, I walked down to the rocky beach at low tide to collect driftwood for the fire. The wood is soaked with salt, so it burns with blue and green flames. I watched the colored fire for hours this evening. It is mesmerizing. The temperature is 39 degrees. Winter has arrived. November 2nd, 1894. The sea is restless today, heaving with a heavy swell even though there is no wind. The locals call it a groundswell, usually a sign of a distant storm. I spent the morning greasing the rotation rollers. The heavy lens floats on a bath of mercury and rides on steel rollers. They must move without friction. I worked slowly, methodical in every movement. One slip could jam the mechanism. At noon, I saw a seal resting on the rocks below. It looked up at the tower, then slid back into the gray water. We are 2 solitary creatures observing each other. I lit the lamp at 4:35 p.m. The night stretches out longer now. November 3rd, 1894. The groundswell has subsided, leaving a confused, choppy sea. The wind is light, variable from the east. I spent the morning in the lantern room, cleaning the ventilation tubes. Dust and dead insects accumulate there, blocking the airflow needed for the lamp to burn brightly. I used a long wire brush. It is satisfying to see the soot fall away. The temperature is hovering around 38 degrees. I can see my breath in the air inside the tower. I kept the stove burning all day, feeding it small amounts of coal to maintain a steady warmth. In the evening, I sharpened my pencil to a fine point and ruled new lines in the ledger. The paper is smooth under my hand. November 4th, 1894. Sunday, a day of rest. I did not work, save for the essential duties of the light. The sky is a flat, featureless beret, merging with the ocean at the horizon. It is difficult to tell where the water ends and the sky begins. I spent hours sitting in the gallery doorway, wrapped in a blanket, watching the rain fall. It falls vertically, without wind to drive it. The sound is a gentle hiss against the sea. I read a few chapters of a novel left by the previous keeper, The Moonstone. It is a mystery, but my mind drifts from the plot. I prefer the reality of the tides. At sunset, the clouds broke briefly to reveal a pale, watery moon. November 5th, 1894. On the mainland, they celebrate Guy Fawkes Night with bonfires and fireworks. Here, the darkness is absolute. I looked towards the distant coast through the telescope at 8 p.m. I thought I saw a faint flicker of orange light, perhaps a bonfire in the village square, but it might have been a trick of the eye. I felt a pang of loneliness, sharp and sudden. To counter it, I busied myself with the clockwork weights. I wound the mechanism with extra care, listening to the heavy click of the ratchet. The machine is my companion. It does not celebrate, it only works. I drank an extra cup of tea and retired early. November 11th, 1894, Sunday. The air is still today, but bitterly cold. The thermometer reads 34 degrees. I spent the morning reading. I have read all the newspapers now, even the advertisements for patent medicines and city tailors. They seem like fiction. At noon, I climbed to the very top of the lantern roof to inspect the wind vane. The metal was so cold it burned my fingers through my gloves. The view from up there is absolute. Nothing but the endless gray Atlantic and the jagged line of the coast. I felt a profound sense of peace. I am the watcher, and the world is quiet. November 12th, 1894. The winter birds have arrived. A flock of snow buntings landed on the gallery railing this morning. Small, white, and restless. They did not stay long. I checked the oil stores one last time for the month. We have enough to last through January, even if the supply boat is delayed by storms. This knowledge is a comfort. The afternoon was dark. The sun was hidden behind thick stratus clouds. I lit the lamp early at 3:55 p.m. The beam is the only thing that defines the horizon now. Without it, sea and sky are one black void. November 13th, 1894. A heavy sleet began falling at midday. It strikes the glass with a sharp hissing sound. I spent the day inside, polishing the brass tools in the workshop. The smell of oil and metal is familiar and grounding. I suspect tonight will be a hard night for any ships at sea. The waves are beginning to crest white. I made sure the fire in the watchroom is banked high with coal. It glows with a steady orange warmth. I am ready for the night. I am ready for the winter. November 14th, 1894. The sleet turned to snow overnight. I woke to a world transformed. The rocks, the path, the roof of the shed, all covered in a thin white blanket. It is silent. Snow absorbs sound. I shoveled the walkway to the gallery door. The air is crisp and clean. I stood there for a long time, just breathing it in. The logbook is almost full. I have recorded the wind, the rain, the oil, and the light. It is a record of a life lived in service to the safety of others. As the sun sets, painting the snow in shades of violet and blue, I close the book. The light is turning. All is well.